Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. Excited to have Dan Englander here with us today, CEO founder of Sales Schema, B2B expert, actually working with marketing agencies and connecting some of the top brands in the world there, Walmart, Amazon's. Excited to dive deep into the world of B2B here today. Dan, thanks for being with us.
Jason, yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Excellent. So B2B marketing, business to business, told a lot of fundamental marketing channels don't work here. There's very specific tactics that could show large returns and really have an impact in the business development process. Could you share with us a bit more about what you do, maybe some of your story, leading into Sales Schema and how everything was founded?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, out of college in like 2010, I moved to New York and didn't really know what I was going to do. And I think that I always joke that if you move to New York and you don't know what you want to do, you kind of just end up in like the dustbin of the media world, in
Sure.
the sewer of the media world. So I basically ended up in an ad agency, and I worked on the account side and kind of like literally I was the one that was answering problems on Facebook walls about people buying, counterfeit headphones. One of our clients was a big electronics company, and worked, pitched a lot of things, and basically like from there, moved on to being the first employee and head of new business at an animation studio called IdeaRocket, and we were basically selling animated video to Fortune 500 companies and tech startups, and kind of doing like high end explainer videos and commercials and that sort of thing. So I think really got a lot of experience with that and learned kind of how to manage a sales process while also having to serve clients, which I think was, in hindsight, really good entrepreneurial experience, kind of having to bounce between those things, and eventually help them do pretty well. And we got to seven figures and got a bunch of Fortune 500 clients and that sort of thing. And then around like late 2014, kind of did the very cliche like Tim Ferriss, I'm going to quit my job and travel Asia kind of thing, right? And ended up self-publishing a couple books about account management, just kind of like within the creative agency world, and traveled Asia for a few months with my girlfriend at the time, and then basically launched what started out as a consultancy. And it kind of reminded me of like the first season of Better Call Saul, if you can see that. And I was like bouncing between weird clients and that sort of thing. And then and eventually kind of like realized that the people that I could help most were agencies. That was sort of where I had the most experience. And also like there was just a big need in that area for, top of funnel help, demand generation, lead generation, basically getting doors open, helping with the top part of the funnel on the sales front. I also realized that that was something that could actually scale and, went beyond just like me coaching somebody or something. So that's essentially, how I started the business and have grown it since then, basically.
Very nice. Very nice. I've done some travel through Asia myself too. Where were you working through that, or you took a break and saw some exciting places?
A little bit of both. I think that I've since gone back for like another month, and I've tried to work while nomading. And the first stint I actually ended up getting a lot done, like working in weird coffee shops in Saigon or whatever,
Yeah.
like a more white collar version of Apocalypse Now or something. But since then, I've also done Brazil for like about a month, and now I'm more boring. I'm pretty much in New York working stiff at this point, but not just since COVID, even before that. But yeah, I found it tough to kind of like keep my head in the right place while nomading for too long.
Sure. I've done it for conferences, 10 days, couple weeks stretch at a time. Always
Yeah.
wanted to do the nomading thing. And I know it's such a fascinating topic to everyone, as remote work is the new standard. So I had to ask there,
Yeah,
try to ask the questions the audience wants to hear.
well, yeah, no, it's a really interesting topic, and I don't want to take us too far off course, but like I think that now the whole world's moving towards that, and I guess like me and the sort of like bootstrapped cohort that I was in are a little bit ahead of the game, so maybe it can be useful in that way. And I think that what I tended to see is most people that have that optionality to nomad still kind of end up in cities. So I still think there's going to be like a lot of intrinsic value to living in a city. I still think that's going to happen. And yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think that especially with COVID, like if you've got to, quarantine for 2 weeks, vacations for a week make no sense. So I think it's just going to grow. You're just going to have a lot of people that are doing permanent or semi-permanent work. We'll see where it goes. I think it's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And looking at Sales Schema, you guys have an amazing track record, looking at case studies, over 7,000 campaigns, over 50 agency clients, very high volumes of closed business, a lot of coffee in there too that you mentioned. As a coffee fan, had to shout that out. But what is the overall process? How are you guys able to put together these type of results and go about the B2B obstacles?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've definitely learned a lot, and like the part of your title, optimized over time. And I think that in the early days, not the early days, it wasn't that long ago, but early on, and then kind of continuing up until the last couple of years, I think what used to work for agencies and also for lots of the B2B professional services, a lot of offerings out there was something to the effect of, hey, we're going to find the decision maker, we're going to nurture them and chase them down and throw materials at them and videos and case studies and funnels and drip sequences and get them to a place of being ready to have a sales conversation, right? And I think that that can still work. I'm not saying that's dead or anything. I hate those articles like XYZ is dead, right? I think there's a place to be direct. I think that it can work. But what we started seeing happening, especially with offerings that are perceived to be commoditized, like marketing services and web design, web development, branding, whatever, is that even when our clients were perfectly positioned and we were, bringing the right things to the right people and everything, eventually it got to a place where people were getting inundated so much for a couple of reasons, and it wasn't effective for a couple of reasons. The first is that there's just a lot more competition overall for services and for agencies and for freelancers and that sort of thing. And the second is competition for attention, right? Where we basically had a situation where, everybody that was whining and dining each other and going to trade shows now had to flock to digital almost overnight. So this trend was obviously already happening, but it just, the knob got turned up to 11 with COVID and so on. So then the sort of the effect of that was that decision maker would now say, great, thanks for reaching out. I'll put you in a file. And when we want an agency or we want XYZ, we'll reach out to you. And that kept happening more and more. So eventually we kind of had to find a better way in. So to answer your question, the way that we've moved all campaigns in the last couple of years is more towards, a relationship driven approach, but done at scale. And what that tends to look like is figuring out the sorts of people that are likely to talk to our clients based on, a business and or personal commonality, and starting with them at least before going elsewhere, and then using that in first, so that the relationships are always being built. And that numbers game is always being played regardless of what's going on with our clients, basically.
And so focusing on the individuals, looking to build some type of connection there and using digital tools, as you mentioned.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And to give a little context on that with the case study, right now, we've done campaigns. The craziest campaigns we've done is basically we had a salesperson, at an agency that played soccer in college. So, and they were selling into enterprise software brands. So we identified C-level and or marketing leaders that also played soccer in college, and then used that as the way in, and then said, hey, by the way, I'm running this agency. We do these services. We've worked with big clients like this, that, and the third, can we talk? And then from a situation like that, that's where we might be getting 1, 3, 5, 10 appointments a week or something like that. Where in a previous era, if we had just beaten down their door and said, hey, I've got a bunch of ideas for your brand, let's talk. It's like, it can work. It's just, but only if they're solution aware, so then the problem is that relationship never gets built to begin with.
Sure. And that makes perfect sense. Brilliant on the target audience building. And, it's something that we get to do on a case by case level with our business development. And I come from the world of ad tech. 2010 to 2014 was calling on agencies with mobile advertising opportunities, and saw how far the relationships carried there, and how everyone had the same, ad data express contact info, and, really have to do something that stands out in a personalized, customized way. So love that concept, and being able to relate, passions like that, soccer, playing in school, things along those lines. I'm usually seeing it on more of a a mass level. I mean, just talking to digital tools as an example, what we get asked about B2B and what comes to mind for me is Google search ads, maybe Facebook lead form ads, going to a click funnel or a landing page with an email drip and leading into an email newsletter pass drip, pointing at different pieces of content that the audience is going to find valuable. Maybe they could use it with one of their client agency conversations. Maybe they could use it in a perspective, conversation or anything that's happening within the brand itself. But being able to have something that'll be worthwhile and engaging to the audience, doing some retargeting throughout the process. The more third-party coverage you can point at, the better. We were talking about digital conferences a bit earlier, publisher coverage, influencer coverage, anything that can validate with the audience. Is that true with the agency new business process? Are those tools viable for the type of conversations that you guys are in on a daily basis?
I think the short answer is yes. It's just a different it's just a different tool in the toolbox, right? So I think that sort of thing, inbound, getting somebody to click and serving them information and getting them all, ready to go, I think it's just different, and our approach is definitely more outreach and outbound centric. I think in a perfect world, you're doing everything. You might be building that material, investing in ads. In B2B, it's LinkedIn ads can be really effective. They're also expensive, and that's not our specialty. So kind of grain of salt. But my understanding is, most people doing well in that space have developed. We've interviewed a lot of people kind of in the LinkedIn ads space or developing, lead magnets that aren't so focused as to be like, hey, book an appointment with us to buy, but not so not so detached that it's just like an article. It might be something that they download to learn how to do something related to your offering. But I think that outbound should always be part of that toolbox and should always be going ideally in conjunction with both. And I think the reason for that is because most of our clients and most agencies out there, assuming they've been around the block for a year or two, have a lot of experience and a lot of case studies and a lot of story, and have what it takes to build that relationship with their future client. It's just that they're not doing that enough, right? They kind of have a cobbler's children issue where they're really good at serving their clients, but it's not going towards themselves as much. So yeah, I think if you have the resources, doing all of the above is great. I think that if you can only pick one, and I'm definitely biased, outreach and being able to like build those relationships consistently is going to at least pay the bills, not a lot more. So
Yeah,
that's kind of our experience with it. Yeah.
absolutely. And then that's why I ask, with LinkedIn, we found the ads to be costly, not the same type of conversion behavior as we see on social, even for B2B and with some of the job titles or email list uploads that we can do for outbound there. Meanwhile, for LinkedIn, outreach has been very effective for us.
Yeah.
I've been able to put together customized messages and build large partnerships through direct manual LinkedIn outreach. We also do it for broader targets, but we also do it with some automated tools and be able to set up scripts there, be able to upload lists and have them live in Sales Navigator, be able to have the right titles for the right searches. We even do it for some of our investor campaigns and our investor outreach for startups that we're working with, and see strong returns on that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts towards LinkedIn outreach? What are your thoughts towards some of the tools, or just what makes a message resonate best? Again, I really like the personalized approach you guys have. So curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that we like to, without sounding pompous, we like to think more about the overall strategy, than this or that channel. And I think that if you think about the psychology of an approach where you're starting with relationship building, it doesn't really work super well if you're then being persistent and following somebody around, and you hitting them up on a bunch of different channels. I'm not knocking that at all. I think that being direct and being persistent in order to sell somebody something can be really effective. I think for our clients, they're selling things that are A, complex, and B, perceived as commoditized, even when they're not. Even if they do have something that's really special, it's put in that bucket. So we've got to be a little craftier in order to build that relationship first. I'm not sure about your offering exactly. I think, you guys are involved in blockchain a lot, which is definitely compelling and so on. So and I'm making this up, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I would guess that, with blockchain, you might be able to be more direct because it's interesting and it's novel and people need to figure it out. There's more of that bleeding neck pain to figure out blockchain. So you don't have to bring that bazooka to the knife fight as much. And I would say you keep doing what you're doing. And I think that we have other clients, especially in Amazon right now, where we don't have to be as crafty. We can be more direct and just beat on some doors and get meetings and so on. But eventually, what happens in every market, and there's a lot of people that have written more about this than I have, is that every market becomes mature and uh, good click through rates. I think there's a great article called "The Law of Shitty Click Through Rates." If you don't mind me cursing. I forgot who. I think maybe somebody with Paul Graham. I apologize to whoever wrote that, but eventually you get to a place where that directness is less effective, and you got to be craftier, and that's kind of where we come in. So to answer your question, though, like in terms of the psychology of emails and outreach and everything, um, it really depends on the situation, but I think what we found to work is making the message look different than everything else. So I think that if you're writing this yourself, one exercise you can do is go into your spam box and like when you have a draft, bring that draft, pull it up while you're in your spam box and make sure it looks completely different. The vibe with a cold email should always be different than, not always, but usually be different than a newsletter, so like weird subject lines or something that you wouldn't send to like a friend or an acquaintance normally if it wasn't like a cold email, like don't change that up. A lot of our most successful subject lines are just like intro, first sender name, recipient name. It's like something that's really boring like that. So there's a lot of things that are kind of counterintuitive. A lot, like, we don't send links very often in cold email, for a lot of reasons. A lot of the times it looks like something that somebody might have just hammered out on their phone, so it's jumbled in one block. That sort of thing can work really well. Also, just the phrasing of the call to action, like getting away from this, like, if you like, please let me know a couple times that work, blah, 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 blah. It's like, instead of just say like open to a call, want to talk, like something that you would hammer out on your phone can work a lot better. And I know, and the way it plays out is the most common responses that we get to our own internal outreach are people saying, I usually don't respond to this sort of thing, but there's just something about it. I just like felt like I wanted to talk with you. So
Yeah.
that's what you're going for, basically.
Yeah. I remember talking to some agencies for some cellular providers, and they were telling us 300 some odd vendors would reach out to them a week. So having, the ability to stand out there. Love what you're saying about the block. I want any type of message to feel like I wrote it, even if it's a template or some type of message that's going out in volume or used in communications there. I'm not going to include 10 links in something I send a friend. Maybe a link if it's something I really want them to check out. I know they're going to have they're going to, find value in it. But yeah, it's got to feel like it was written there, which for me is the shorter, the better. When someone sends me a big email, even if they wrote it themselves, I'm not paying attention to it. I'm going to, streamline through it. But if it's a sentence, 2 sentences, it's almost easier for me just to complete it. And that's great, being able to focus on the message there, giving us some different tips for architecture. Anything else when it comes to subject or body paragraph that has just produced outstanding levels of performance for response rates?
It's a good question, and it's hard to see, to kind of like parse the noise from the data, because like so much of it is situational. But I think a lot of it is again just like making the email look different than the other things that are in your inbox and that sort of thing. And so that's a big part of it. And another is being willing to try different things. Like, I think that you kind of have to find that fine line. Like, it's really easy for us to be like, well, I wouldn't respond to this sort of thing. And, on one hand, you have to be authentic and be sending something that you feel comfortable with. And I think it bears repeating that, your prospects, you are not your prospects. You don't really know what their issues are, or like what's going on in their head when they get that email. So I think having an open mind to that, and maybe like being able to leave your comfort zone a little bit is helpful to figure out what's actually going to work, because it'll surprise you. So to be a little,
Sure.
a little vague there, I think that's important. Beyond that, I think just getting into the technical rabbit hole and nerding out a little bit. Deliverability is a big thing. I think that outbound in a lot of ways has become like SEO, like the way SEO is now, or it's rather becoming like SEO, where, and that might not make sense, but to kind of like put it in perspective, there was a time where if you wanted to hack your website and get it to the top, you could like, kind of like do a bunch of spammy backlinks and then whatever. And now it's about the hard work of actually putting out good content and doing the stuff you should be doing. Outbound, I don't know, 5 years ago was more like that. You could just buy a list and sort of like, run some people through it and make it work. And yeah, the numbers game thing still matters, and volume still matters and all that. But if you offend a bunch of people, or a bunch of people click that manual spam button, then what's going to happen is that Google and Microsoft and whoever else are going to say, you're a bad actor, and we're going to like put you in the spam box or put you in the newsletter promotion, in which case nothing gets read. So what's happening is that people don't know this is happening. The way it's playing out is your open rate goes down. Your open rate goes down sub, I don't know, 30%, 20% or whatever. And what they're thinking is, oh, nobody's opening, so let me go fiddle with subject lines for the next 5 years and see if that works. But what's really happening is your domain's gotten tanked. So the way to avoid that, and there's a lot further to go into this, is to basically, send to the right people, make sure the data is good, and make sure that even if somebody doesn't want to talk to you, they're probably not going to click spam. So again, back to personalization, back to the hard work, back to kind of like sending people the message that they're at least not going to like be mad at. They ain't going to be mad at it, even if they don't want to talk to you right now.
Sure.
That's kind of the vibe. Yeah.
Exactly. I actually referenced that with our business development team, and is this a message they're going to be mad at? Following up in January, wishing them a happy new year, talking about something they're doing specifically. You're not even asking for a call. They're not going to be mad at it, yet you're still in their presence.
Yeah.
I've also found.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to
No, you're
say,
good.
I'm such a softie with it, with salespeople that pitch me, because we do it all day, that I almost never press spam. But I forgot what it was. Like somebody last week was like, they had a subject line that was like, "I'm giving up after this," or something like really like weird and harsh.
Yeah.
And then I did click spam on that, because I was just like, "Are you kidding me, man? Like don't send me that, because it's just weird. Like that that's just why would I?" Like I actually think that somebody I might know is sending me something that's bad and very grave, so like it's just deceptive. So that's the
Yeah.
sort of thing to get away from.
And what are you supposed to say to that? Like, okay, I'm going to respond now. Like, it's not really empowering.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to think it from that psychological standpoint. I get pulled in by some of those too. I'm guilty of signing up for white papers on Facebook lead form ads, or different types of documents, studies that I want. And then I'll get emails from them forever. And if they're giving me valuable content, cool. But other times it's just those spammy type of emails, and I think it's something pressing, and then it's their sales pitch and video of the day, act now. It's misleading. I found for us though, numbers really resonate. That may just be for working with startups, and a lot of those, it's their first engagement with the marketing agency, or they don't have an AOR, an agency of record, or anything like that in place. But if I'm able to talk about the volume of clients we've worked with on investor acquisition efforts via investment crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, the amount of capital that we've produced in the past month, past year, in total, it validates us. We're not just another group spamming them. Now, I know numbers aren't necessarily going to play with, Amazon or some of these other groups, and maybe something different that they're looking for. But like you said, having an idea of who your audience is, what's going to resonate with them, what's going to stand out among others, for direct. But I wanted to ask you about referrals, referral partners. The majority of our business comes from referral partnerships, people who say, hey, you should speak to DNA. That trust is there, everything involved allows you to stand out. Historically, looking at different reports, conversion rate is higher in that type of scenario. Do you guys ever direct your outreach? Do you guys ever direct your strategy to the development of these type of strategic relationships, or is it always at the prospective client?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think if anything, doing outreach in this way can work even better from when you're thinking about strategic partnerships and that sort of thing. And that's just because there's less risk that there's less fear that recipient's facing about getting on the phone with you. You know, it's because that's really what you're up against is somebody's in their inbox, they're doing work, they're busy, you know, and what it's sort of a binary. They're like, yes, I'll talk to this person, or no, no, I won't right now. They might have follow-up questions, but that's generally how it plays out. So yeah, we've definitely, you know, had a number of successful campaigns kind of like leaning into building partnerships because those people, you know, they're the people we're reaching out to have a lot less risk. They're going to be way more open to talking because they know they're not going to get pitched on something or forced into anything, and it's less likely that they'll have their time wasted. So I think that
Yeah,
those can go really well. Yeah.
absolutely. We look for opportunities there where there's a mutual interest. For us as a marketing agency, working with early stage mid-market type organizations, if we're able to build a partnership with a creative agency, groups that are doing video for equity crowdfunding campaigns,
Yeah.
even lawyers, CPAs who are doing the financial audits to be submitted to the SEC for some of those initiatives. Anyone who's servicing those want to see those groups do the best that they can, be as successful as possible. There's often a relationship building period where we're showing them stuff that we're doing. Maybe we have a natural overlap with the client, and then they're asking us, "Hey, can I make these introductions elsewhere?" But I just know, relationships, those type of introductions make the world go round. So imagine if there's a mutual trusted contact that could bring in a large piece of business for one of the agencies you're working with. So I was
Yeah.
curious to see if efforts are ever around that type of
Yeah.
formation.
We do a lot of campaigns to VCs and to private equity for our clients because that can be a great way into to for them to get to their ultimate, you know, brand side clients or whatever.
Oh,
I
very nice.
think that we're usually able to get lots of doors open. I think the challenge is being able to like structure a deal in the right way, you know, being able to kind of like keep in touch with people and build that relationship and kind of get from 0 to 1, you know, with one of those partnerships takes a little more time. But that's I think there's no reason not to be, you know, opening those doors consistently and, you know, building that Rolodex basically.
Very nice. Very nice. And I want to get into some recommendations. So our audience consists of a lot of founder CEOs, some some marketing professionals for large organizations as well, and a variety of service providers. What type of tips, what type of actionable insights can you provide for them to test out? I know you've mentioned email, LinkedIn. What tests would you encourage them to take action around after listening?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. So I think that you kind of like thinking, you know, foundationally, the first thing is just kind of figuring out, you know, what makes for a good client and making sure that, you know, you're clear on your positioning and like where the value lives and everything. Because ultimately, the funnel or the pipeline, you know, you don't want any sort of blockage in it. Like even if you're able to get a bunch of appointments, but you're not really sure what the value is, then that's not really worth it unless you just want to test something. So I think that's the first thing, and then from there, you know, I think one thing that can be pretty useful is instead of thinking about it in terms of um, who is the ultimate, you know, decision maker, thinking about it more in terms of who's likely to have a conversation with me in the sort of companies I want to be doing business with, so that I can get in with them. So what to get actionable, what that might look like is, you know, looking at maybe it's where you went to college, you know, is there somebody in that, is there a group of people in that alumni network that could be helpful, or maybe you're in a trade association, other people associated with that you can talk with, and using that as the way in. And I think a big part of that is not overcomplicating not trying to build that automated funnel overnight or that automated drip sequence where it's like LinkedIn and email and direct mail and phone and all these different things, but really just thinking about, okay, what is it going to take for this person to give me 30 minutes of their time? And can I do that? You know, if I were to systematize, you know, the personalization of this process, could I do it to a list of 50 people or 100 people over the next week? And starting from that perspective, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Great tips. Fully agree with every bit of that. What happens if it doesn't work? What happens if they're a week into outreach. They're just not getting the response rates that they're looking for. They're Googling around, looking at average open response rates. They're not seeing it. Have you worked on any campaigns that were not producing the benchmarks? You made some optimizations and then they were over delivering. What did those steps entail?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the sort of triage is like first making sure that the passenger pigeons are landing and getting to where they're supposed to. So that's kind of all about, deliverability. And sometimes it can be, a little bit of a black box to figure out, but I think like making sure that your open rates are at least above, 50% or so is probably part of that. Especially if you're talking about like a small batch campaign, over targeted email. And I think that, one way to test that is probably calling people and checking in, seeing if you can get somebody on the line and ask if they've seen your message. And obviously that's not scalable and it's tedious, but in the early days, I think it's a good way to kind of figure things out. Beyond that, I think it's less. We used to be really big about, A/B testing, subject lines and calls to action and all that sort of stuff, and there still is a place for that. But I think that the main metric we hold ourselves to now is meeting rate, and we're looking to get, roughly 5 to 20 meetings a week is kind of what we're looking at for our clients, and that's because I think when you do personalization the right way, um, you're going to get meetings as long as like the messages are going out and they're getting read. Most people will agree to talk to you if you're able to personalize. So instead of getting obsessed with just like reply rates and open rates and all these different things, just think about, okay, I need to close this amount of business. I need to get on whatever 10 calls to close a deal. I need to be sending 50 emails to get one person on a call, and thinking about it more in terms of that meeting rate metric as opposed to getting lost in the sauce with all these other numbers. That's kind of, hopefully that's helpful. I know that's kind of a lot of stuff, but yeah.
No, that gives perfect notes, on how to address it, looking at the numbers, but also the bigger picture. And what about when it is? Are there limitations for when it is working? Are there limitations for how to scale? Or what are the steps involved with that? Okay, the open rate, we're over 50%, we're getting clients out of this. Is it, bringing on more salespeople, broadening target audiences? How do you scale these type of efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in our domain, for whatever reason, a lot of our clients tend to be kind of like salespeople slash owners or executives. So the challenge is they get a lot more meetings because they're higher on the totem pole, but they have less time, right? And sales takes time. There's just no way around it. Like you're playing this numbers game. I don't care how good you are at closing. If you're Babe Ruth or whatever, you're still 400 batting average. I mean, 6 people out of 10 are telling you no. So whatever, those numbers play out different ways for sales, but that's still what you're looking at. So that's a big challenge. And I think that like what we say to our clients at the beginning of every engagement is, hey, like, ultimately you should look to be hiring somebody. We need to help you build this car before you hire the driver. And right now you're the only viable driver. So yes, I think hiring salespeople is the way to scale. You just don't want to do it too early. So that's the first component of scaling things. I think the other component is re-engagement and this sort of like getting over this mindset of like, well, I sent them an email, they didn't get back to me, so that's it. Um, the better way to look at it is after a few months, you can hit those people up again. Maybe you're doing it in a different way. Maybe you're sending them content. And also the people that you're talking to, most of them aren't going to be ready to buy anytime soon, especially if you're selling 6, 7 figure, 8 figure engagements, whatever it might be. So that means having a system whereby, every 30 days, don't overcomplicate it, but every 30 days, you're looking at that pipeline that you've built and you said, okay, this person hasn't been touched in 30 days. Is there a relevant reason to reconnect? Are we doing a virtual event, in a week? Is there something new on their end? Is there something new product or service? Do we have new work to talk about? Hey, I just wanted to run this by you. It's in your space, would it make sense to reconnect on this? And that's really like long-term where the business comes from. And that's how you scale it, is that salesperson not over automating things, but looking at their Rolodex and figuring out creatively how to get those people back into the fold again, basically.
Yeah. and not shying away when not getting a response, like you mentioned. There's a stat, it's actually a graph I used to use, and it showed the amount of follow-ups salespeople would have and how it drops off, contact 2, contact 3, only 10% follow up more than 5 times, when most sales happen somewhere between contact 7 and 12. I know that's going to differ based on the type of engagement, type of industry. I see B2B business development cycles that take 18 months with some clients. So I know that varies, but just the overarching message of it. Now it has to be done in a well-receptive way. So like you mentioned, you're just automating follow-ups, and it's like, how about now, over and over again?
Yep.
Send them 1,000 messages. It's not going to do it. But if you're doing it in some type of authentic, value-driven way, where it's a mutually beneficial relationship, expecting there to be some volume there, and maybe that taking from a 15%, 150% batting average, batting 150, and being talked about, thrown back down to the minors, or playing at 330, playing at 400, as you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the problem is, a lot of the times, like, kind of getting lost in the metrics, is that, a touch point like sending somebody an email is sort of equated with a phone call, or like what we're doing now, like actually talking and having a conversation, which is it's not even just like a different, it's a completely different situation. It's a completely different stratosphere, basically. Like, you're on a different planet now once you've like actually built a relationship with somebody. So I think a better way to think of it is like, front load the work of the creativity and of getting somebody to agree to talk sooner rather than later, as opposed to the sort of like automated follow-up game where it's like, hey, we're still here, are you ready to buy yet? So I actually think, like, counterintuitively, there's a lot more work involved in building and making that automated machine work long term than there is in just being able to build relationships consistently and so on. So that's kind of our approach to it.
100%. 100%. And Dan, these are great ideas. Any parting thoughts that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just like, don't overcomplicate it. It's better to ship on something that's not perfect. You can use a spreadsheet and, maybe 1 or 2 tools over email, and that's all you really need, at least to get something off the ground. Maybe a list of a few people. So I think that if you're starting at 0, don't fall into the trap of trying to get all your ducks in a row just to get something out there. So that's probably my best parting advice.
Yeah, sometimes done is better than perfect, I find, and can create a stronger response. And Dan, if any listeners want to get hold of you, what's your preferred method of communication?
Yeah, email is great. So just Dan@saleschema.com. And we have a podcast as well called the Digital Agency Growth Podcast, which is linked up at saleschema.com/podcast, basically.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Well, Dan, thanks so much for being with us here today. Appreciate all the words of wisdom, and look forward to more development of Sales Schema over time. Look forward to having listeners back on for the next episode as well. Thanks everyone for coming out.
Jason, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.